True. I mean, I feel like we kind oh, no. I'm not playing that. I don't know. Does that go right to you? Thank you.
Oh, I can't remember a name to save my life. It's terrible. Yeah, the little feeding chart. Only it was always upside down. I'm like, no, you need to orient it for me. Well, you know that staff always has your back, so you're never floating alone.
I know, right? Oh, okay. Everyone could take their seats. We're going to go ahead and try and get started soon. Just a moment. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm going to need to project, but good afternoon to everyone and Happy New Year to you. Welcome back to this building and to the meeting of the COG Board of Directors. I am your chair, at least for the next 5 minutes, Christian Dorsey, and I'd like to call this board meeting for January 2023 to order. Thank you all for joining us today, both in the room and for those of you who are joining us participating via the hybrid option. So, let's begin, as we always do, if you will join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are going to move on with today's meeting. Always exciting as we organize for the new year. And the time has come for me to pass the torch as COG Board Chair. Let me just say in all sincerity that it has been an absolute honor to serve you all this year. We have made great progress on both existing and new regional goals, and I am very excited to see what the future holds. I believe that our continued work on the Region United framework is truly going to transform this region. And I'm excited to see that all of the priorities that we've spent so much time developing and fleshing out around high capacity transit, equity emphasis areas, housing and climate will continue to be a focus in terms of implementation for the coming year. And if I can, I'd love to suggest another priority for board consideration this year, and it will be finding the space where COG might be useful in helping coordinate the various stakeholders in the public sector and in the private sector in figuring out how we return workers to in-person employment. Many of our jurisdictions see the benefits of this in the health of our commercial assets and the associated tax revenue, but also want to think about the businesses who rely on daytime and office workers and supporting their continued existence and growth. And having this happen in a coordinated fashion is incredibly important, which is where I see potentially an opportunity for COG. Because if it does not happen in a coordinated fashion, and transit, for example, is not able to scale up to accommodate delivering safe and useful and reliable service to accommodate the return to work, it's not really going to facilitate this region getting back to full vibrancy and full health. So thank you for indulging me in that. I couldn't resist one last area of focus because I have come to love that COG is the place where a policy nerd like me feels right at home. So I am grateful for all the support that you have granted me this year. And in particular, I would like to recognize our outgoing Executive Director, Chuck Bean, for his incredible support, leadership, and advice and counsel throughout the year. I'd also like to acknowledge our departing Executive Assistant, Pat Warren, who gratefully was in the room as I mentioned that. It certainly feels like with you and Chuck leaving at about the same time, we are having a significant piece of what COG is leaving out the door. But because of the way you both have gone about doing your jobs, what you know and what you have established as a legacy will endure. So we very much appreciate that. And on a personal note, let me just also thank some other people, Monica Baruti Nunez, Janelle Partman, who is no longer here, our General Counsel, Sharon Pandek. Thank you so much for all of your support of me this year. I can say without any hyperbole, anytime I asked for something, it was delivered. And more often than not, I didn't even have to ask because they intuited what was needed and made sure I could at least perform my job reasonably capably. But we're going to get to a level of something that's beyond reasonably capable because it is now my great honor to present the report of the nominating committee who have established a list of 3 individuals to serve this board in the upcoming year. The nominating committee met in November to discuss and vote on the nominations in front of you today. They are officially listed in your board packet in Resolution R1-2023 and are as follows. To serve as chair, Kate Stewart, council member from Montgomery County. To serve as vice chair, Charles Allen, council member from the District of Columbia. And to serve as vice chair, Rodney Lusk, supervisor from Fairfax County.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I hate to stop you because you're on a roll, but I think we're short. We're short, maybe one person.
Oh, we are?
So we're
sort of a quorum. Wow. Right.
Ms. Beauty.
No, I can continue. I was going to do that anyway, Mark. No. All right, can we do a quorum check? All right.
So we need one person.
So I would now like to, in my continued service as chair of this board, I would like to turn it over to the presumptive chair of the board to recognize, to move to another segment of the agenda to recognize our outgoing executive director.
Great. Thank you, Chair Dorsey. So this afternoon, we get to recognize Chuck Bean, the Executive Director of COG. Chuck has been the Executive Director for the last decade, and he will be leaving us as of February 1st. Chuck has done a great deal over the past decade. He has applied his leadership skills in helping direct COG's subject matter experts and administrative professionals on COG staff, manage an annual budget of $41 million, and bolster COG's reputation as the hub for partnership, where area officials collaborate, set goals, and take action to shape a better region. Chuck was instrumental in a number of issues that we don't have time today to go into, but I think over the next couple of weeks before he leaves, we will have a drumbeat of all those accomplishments. But today, we're going to highlight just a few. He has looked at addressing the housing shortfall in our region, looked at dedicated and secured dedicated funding for Metro, established the Metro Safety Commission and the Chief Equity Officers Committee. And he was instrumental in helping the region navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, that is just to name a few. I will say personally, it has been a pleasure working with Chuck over these last few years. Having you at the helm of this organization with your steady hand, your understanding of the complexities of our region, and quite frankly, your patience in wrangling 24 jurisdictions and the elected officials that represent those has been outstanding. So Chuck, thank you for your years of service, and we are glad that you're actually staying around in the region. I am sure we will tap you many times in the months and years to come. So am I allowed to do the motion now? No, I have to wait. We got a quorum. So. We have a quorum now. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion and adopt. So why don't you move? I'll move it. I'll move the resolution R3-2023 honoring the executive director for his service, and we'll open it for a second. Second, all right. Supervisor McCain, second. Chairman McCain, second. And now we'll open it up for discussion. Anyone have any comments? Great. Supervisor Gross.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've had the great good fortune in my time on the COG board to have been on the interview committee for selecting, I think, 3, maybe 4 executive directors. And it's always an interesting challenge because we are used to who was the executive director, and then we're looking at, what are the new things we want to do in COG. And I remember when we interviewed Chuck 10 years ago, there were quite a few people that were interviewed. We had a good bench, or a good selection of folks. And Chuck brought to us some skills that we had not had at COG before, and that was from the nonprofit sector. And we know that as we work as individual jurisdictions, as a regional body, and working with our constituents, that the nonprofit community is really an important one. We couldn't do all we do in our jurisdictions without having the nonprofit community on board with us. And so Chuck brought that to us, which was unique, I think, to COG at the time. He has weathered the storms. I can think of a couple, and he has always, and I think he has brought COG to a new sort of source of attention in the region. We did not get the kind of coverage of COG activities that we are getting with Chuck, and so. In his effort to elevate COG's perspective, he has elevated all of the jurisdictions in the region, and we are better for that. We have more jurisdictions participating now, and I think that is a direct reflection of the hard work that Chuck has done. So thank you, Chuck, and I guess I won't be around to do another executive director next time around. Thanks.
Never say never.
Well, I don't know who's running this meeting, but I'm going to go. Vice Chair Allen.
You're doing great, both of you. I won't prolong this other than to say ditto and echo all the fine comments. I don't know if Chuck remembers, but I actually met him for the first time back when you were working with some of the nonprofit leadership in D.C. It was about 20 years ago. I was a young pup. I think I was about 8 years old maybe. And I was doing one of my first jobs doing policy analyst work, and you were very gracious with your time, and you walked me through some things in D.C. Little did I know that 20 years later or so, we'd be back in this space. Some of our colleagues in other jurisdictions, I think, have passed resolutions, and the D.C. Council was not going to be outdone. So I wanted to let you know that in December, the Council unanimously passed a resolution by all of my colleagues that we titled creatively the Chuck Bean Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Retirement Resolution of 2022, where we said all the nice things that have already been said, but we were very proud to be able to pass this on behalf of the residents of the District of Columbia, and are grateful for the leadership and work that you have done here, and that will stand the test of time. So thank you very much for your incredible work, and I'll make sure I get you a very pretty printed copy of the resolution, which I know you will frame and put in your living room. So thank you.
Great. Any, Monica, do we have any comments online? No. Okay. I will say, not to be outdone by the district, that, sorry. Chair Randall, sorry.
I'm landing planes over here. Yeah, really. So, first of all, Chuck, a couple things I want to say. You know, it is one thing to run a large and complicated organization. It is another whole thing to run a large and complicated organization of elected officials, of politicians, because you don't normally do these jobs without our own particular egos ourselves. And so the fact that you have been able to navigate all of us is pretty amazing. I will also say that one thing I believe you do incredibly well in my experience is that when people are newly elected, there is so much to learn about everything when you're newly elected. And of course, I was following a 20-year person, had been chair for 16 years. You did such a great job in reaching out to us. I had no idea who you were, and like introducing yourself, explaining what COG was, why it's important, and then really trying to get newly elected officials involved right away. What committees do you want to sit on? This is what we do and how. I mean, you know, if COG is a family, you pulled us right into the family right away, and that's unusual. It's hard to get people feeling comfortable almost immediately to a position and a job this big, and especially regional. I've said so many times, I think COG is the most august body in the region, and I think a lot of that has been you. And so thank you for the work you do with newly elected officials and with elected officials just in general. You will be missed. Somebody else will do the job, but you cannot be replaced. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Randall.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just very briefly, I also want to personally congratulate Chuck. We did do a resolution in Fairfax County. I don't have to worry about him framing ours because we put it on very high quality piece of wood plaque. We already took care of that part. But in all seriousness, I want to echo everything that Supervisor Gross said, in particular about Chuck, and certainly what Chair Randall has said. And you know, one of the things that was mentioned earlier is your patience. And I think that's a testament to working with as many elected officials as you have to. You really don't have a choice if you're going to work with this body, and I think we really appreciate that. But in particular, you set a standard for this organization and the collaboration of the region. And so I know it sometimes could be very easy to fall in a parochial travel lane when dealing with various jurisdictions that might have different goals and objectives. But you've done an outstanding job bringing us together on some really important issues to our region. And many of them were named earlier, but not only did you do that, you did it through some of the most difficult times that any of us have faced over the past couple of years. Certainly, the focus of this organization on equity has been a turning page and something that gives us a lot more work to do. But frankly, a lot of that conversation wouldn't happen without your involvement. And so I want to personally thank you for the work you've done for this organization, the standard that you've set for COG moving forward. And on behalf of the residents of Fairfax County, we appreciate all that you've done and look forward to continuing to work with each other. Congratulations.
Great. Thank you, Chairman McKay. I'm going to go to Board President Collins and then Mayor Wilson.
Chuck, I just wanted to really echo a comment made by Ms. Gross. She used the term elevating the status of all of the jurisdictions that are a part of COG, and you have essentially done that. Made a part of my regular conversation, equity emphasis area. You know, that's what I speak about on a regular basis. And I always also want to let you know how much I appreciated your last visit to Charles County when you brought your wife with you. And you guys actually enjoyed your visit in Charles County, which I thought that was tremendous. But your leadership has taken this organization to another level where we are looking with very strong eyes on equity issues. That has really been something that will benefit this entire region. And I just want to personally thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson. Next, now Mayor Wilson, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just echo what's been said, Chuck. You know, I think we are you're not the crazy you performed that role. You know, you're really the cousin who kind of makes sure that everything comes together. And, don't always get the recognition, but ensuring work that's happening all across the region is highlighted. I think that's one of the most incredible things that you've done is, you know, tracking everything that everyone's doing and then quietly saying, no, you might want to look at and I think that's really new. Congratulations on well-deserved retirement. But I know you'll be around in the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Chair Wheeler.
Sorry for being late, but now we have a quorum. Someone should fix the traffic. Yeah, I just personally want to thank you. I know I've expressed my personal thanks. You know, I came here, new elected official, January 1st, 2020, and was clueless and sort of was thrown in the deep end very quickly. And so the connections that I had through COG and through Chuck and Chuck coming out and talking to me were, indispensable. But I just want to also add, I had a long talk about regionalism recently, and I didn't realize, that regionalism didn't necessarily always exist. And COG and some other things that have happened over the last 20 years are a big part of that regionalism, and that how important it is because we have people who, live in Virginia and work in Maryland or work in D.C. or vice versa, how we're really all interconnected, and that was really brought to my attention. And so I think COG and yourself over the many years, even before here, have played a part in that. So I want to thank you. I think it's made the region stronger as a whole, not just COG and the local government. So thank you.
Terrific. All right. Seeing no other comments, I'll just mention, not to be outdone by the district or folks in Virginia, Montgomery County will be with our council president, and the county exec and myself will be providing a proclamation to Chuck on Tuesday of next week. All right. We have a motion and a second. Please let me know. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes, and now rewind, and we'll go back to the beginning of the meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you for another minute, Vice Chair Stewart. We're now going to move back to agenda item number 2, which is election of the 2023 COG board officers. Thank you for those of us who joined to make a quorum. I'd also like to recognize as exemplary members in this meeting, Mr. Collins, Mayor Reed, and Supervisor Gross, because you'll notice Mr. Collins is sitting among the Virginians, and Mayor Reed and Supervisor Gross are sitting among the Marylanders, demonstrating the true spirit of COG. Thank you for leading by example. But with that, as you all know, this is your leadership team for 2023. I've read them all before, so now we're going to move to first seeing if there are any questions about the nominating committee's recommendations. Seeing no questions, now move to a vote. I'd like to hear all those in favor of Kate Stewart for chair, Charles Allen for vice chair, and Rodney Lusk for vice chair. Please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Overwhelmingly, the ayes have it. Congratulations, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair. Now my honor to move the gavel 6 inches.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your leadership. And I will say not just this past year as COG board chair, but over the years for all that you have done for COG as an organization, for each and every one of us, and what you've done for the region. You really, truly have been a leader, and I know being a leader is something we talk a lot about at COG, but you are the definition. Don't eat yet. So, wait, pay attention. Through your actions, words, and example, and your sense of humor, you have really been a leader for all of us, and I just want to personally say thank you for this past year. And we do have a gift for you.
Thought it was just lunch.
So on behalf of the board, I'd like to present this to you.
Wow.
And it is 2 pieces, so.
This is fancy.
Don't bash it too hard.
Don't bash it, and I think they want to get a picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. And Pat has the packaging for you. Great. All right. Well, I will say I am very grateful to all of you for the opportunity to continue working and to assume the position as chair of the board. As I was reflecting on today, I always think of the fact that each of us always stands on the shoulders of those who came before us. And again, I just want to thank Christian so much for his leadership, and to all of you who have been around COG for a long time and have really mapped out, you know, the path that we are on right now. As I look forward to 2023, I think of it as a year of acceleration, of action. We have laid great groundwork in our strategic plans. Region United, under Christian's leadership, has really outlined for us where we need to go. And I know working together, we're going to get there. So I'm very excited, and I thank you all for bestowing this honor on me. My first act as chair, I would like to nominate the 2023 leadership of COG's policy and administrative committees, which are listed on page 7 of your board packet. I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the 2023 policy and administrative committee leadership. Thank you, Supervisor Gross, and Mr. Luss, second. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Seeing none, congratulations to our 2023 Policy Committee chairs, and thank you for your willingness to serve our region. Now we'll move on to the chair's report. For the report today, I'd like to just remind everyone to note the 2023 COG board meeting dates, to save them in your calendar. They can be found on page 10 of your board packet. Please note that we are in person this month, and we will be in person again for our February meeting, and then virtual for March. We are in person in February because we wanted to welcome our new executive director in person, so that hope to see many of you back here in February. Please also note on page 11 is a listing of COG's 2023 Policy Committee meeting dates. All right. Next, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our new COG board members to the board. So far, and I know there are some regions that are still, jurisdictions still finalizing this, but we are joined by the City of Fairfax Mayor, Catherine Reed. Thank you for joining us today. We also have joining the board the Frederick County Executive, Jessica Fitzwater, Montgomery County President, Evan Glass. We also have Prince George's County Council Member Chair, Tom Dernoga, and Council Vice Chair, Walla Blege, are joining our board this year. And I'd like to ask if any of the new COG board members who are with us today would like to introduce themselves and say a few words. Councilmember Glass.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really glad to be here, not only as part of COG's Board of Directors, but to witness the ascension of my colleague and friend, Chair Kate Stewart, who is also my district council member. So I look forward to working with her and all of you over the next number of years. And for those of you who don't know, I've spent the last 4 years at Transportation Planning Board, where we had some very exciting debates over the last number of years, and I look forward to other conversations here at this body.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mayor Reed?
Thank you. I'm a newbie here in every sense of the word. We just had our ceremonial swearing in our first city council meeting yesterday, and as the headline in the paper said, I'm the first mayor to wear pearls instead of a tie. That's kind of new for our community.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to ushering in wonderful things in the city of Fairfax. So be kind and help me out here, because I do want to be a contributing member of this body. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mayor Reed, and congratulations. Do we have anyone online, Monica? Yeah. Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Tom Dernoga from Prince George's County. I'm in my car coming back from Annapolis. It's pleasure to be on the board. A long-time Air Quality Committee rep.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Anyone else, Monica? No. All right. Well, welcome again to our new colleagues on the board. We look forward to working with all of you. Next, we're moving right along to agenda item number 6, which is the Executive Director's Report. And I will turn it over to Mr. Bean to give his last Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Chair Stewart. The application period for our Transportation Land Use Connections Program, that's called TLC, and also roadway safety grants are now open. As background, TLC has funded 167 projects since 2007 for nearly $7.5 million. These are some of the most advanced and exciting projects around the region, I think. The Regional Roadway Safety Program is a newer grant program, and this has funded 14 projects since 2020 for $750,000. Monica will send out links to both of these grant programs in an email this afternoon. In the fall, the board had a briefing about the region's water supply and resiliency and endorsed an effort to advocate with Congress. And I've asked my colleague Steve Bieber to provide an update on this progress.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So Steve Bieber, Water Resources Director here at COG. You may recall back in September, we had a coalition of water utilities come brief the board on a proposed Army Corps feasibility study of the region's water supply that would include identification of secondary water source and additional water storage capability for the Metro Washington region. And we were really glad to get the board's support of that. It's really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to improve security and resilience of the region's water supply. And part of the resolution you passed back in September was asking Congress to authorize the study. I'm happy to report that, in fact, back in December, they did do that as part of the omnibus bill that passed. So the study is now authorized, and we're moving ahead now with seeking appropriations for the study, which could be one of a few different ways, including through the Army Corps Traditional Appropriations Bill, a congressionally directed spending request, so an earmark, or potentially through USACE itself, like as part of their direct budget. We had a meeting this morning with staff from Congresswoman Norton's office. Found out that they have sent a letter to the president asking that he include a request in his 2024 budget, but at the same time, they're working with the Army Corps to see if they have discretionary funds to start the study this year rather than waiting. So we're hopeful that that will work out. Either way, we're going to be working with Congresswoman Norton's office, the congressional delegation here in the region, to continue our bipartisan coalition of support for the study, so hopefully we can get it appropriated in 2024, if not sooner. So happy to answer questions if there are any, but thank you.
Thank you. As Mr. Bieber said, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and it's pretty amazing that something so big is now moving so fast. So I think you'll look forward to updates throughout the year. Like Mr. Dorsey.
Yes, Supervisor Gross has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Steve, back in 1999, COG was part of the participant group for the water summit that we did at George Washington University. It was looking at availability of water through 2035. After that presentation in September, there was some sort of back channel discussions. I was one of them, suggesting that we should do another water summit. Where are we on that? Is that still sort of moving forward, or do we need to do something to nudge it along? I think a water summit could be separate from this particular effort. We really need to look at, if we were looking at 2035, we probably now need to look at 2060.
Yep. So I remember your request, and it was discussed at a Bay Policy Committee meeting too. And we've been kicking around ideas with staff, and what we've settled on is, rather than trying to do like an all-day event, I think you had mentioned sort of 4 pillars of a summit, water supply being one, water quality, and there were some others. So we're going to do it as a virtual event and have quarterly webinars. We're actually planning the first one for February. It's going to be focused around water supply and the work we've been doing with Virginia Tech, University of Maryland, and USGS on freshwater salinization. So I think just today, actually, we settled on a date, which is probably the 15th. So there'll be an announcement coming out for that soon, and then hopefully one workshop a quarter after that on other topics.
Well, thank you. Let's make sure that we get as much information out quickly as we can, because the 1999 summit included the business community, the water co-ops, the local jurisdictions, and even, I think, some of the academia too. And the more people we can have involved in the discussion, the better it would be.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we'll get the announcement out as soon as possible.
Thank you. I'd also like to express my appreciation to 2 retirees, Tom Gates and Pat Warren, both retiring in the next few weeks. Tom has been a stellar administrator, counselor, and colleague to many on staff, and me included. I especially appreciated his support through the pandemic, helping COG adapt to the rapid changes to how we approached our work and our meetings. And to Pat, put simply, she is a COG Hall of Famer. She has helped keep executive directors, plural, organized, helped keep COG board members happy at countless retreats and meetings, and helped provide unparalleled institutional knowledge to her staff gleaned over her 35 or so years at COG. I hope you can wish them both well on their future endeavors, and a round of applause would be appropriate, along with can follow up with either of them on email or a call. And in case you hadn't noticed, we have a VIP audience member today. Clark Mercer, incoming executive director, is expecting to be here, a fly on the wall in the audience. He starts next week. He's not on the clock yet, but he's already dived right in, absorbing all the plans and policy staff have been sending him his way. I told him he wouldn't have to speak at this first meeting today, but I surprised him by calling him out a little bit. I hope you'll be able to greet him after the meeting, but it seems like it would be appropriate to also give him a welcoming round of applause. Madam Chair, that's my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report, and welcome, Mr. Mercer. We look forward to working with you, and I do want to also add my thanks to Mr. Gates for the work he's done at COG. You know, particularly these last few years have been a very trying one for our region, and having him part of the executive group at COG has been very important. And Pat, I'm not going to say goodbye today. I refuse that. This may be your last official board meeting. However, I will just say thank you for your many years of service. I don't think any of us can go without saying how helpful you have been, and that we will miss you greatly. But I think we will say our goodbyes at a later date. Anyone else? All right, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll move on to amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments to our agenda today? Okay, seeing none, we'll continue. Next is approval of the minutes from the December 19th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes? Supervisor Gross moved, Vice Chair Allen seconded. Any comments or questions? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. Moving on now, we do have a consent agenda. We have 6 resolutions on the consent agenda today. You can find them on page 28 of your board packet. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda? No. Okay. I know. Council member, I'm going to give it. Council member Moore moved. Mr. Dorsey. Chair Dorsey seconded. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? The consent agenda passes. All right, moving on. Agenda item 10 is our FY 2022 audited financial statements. The board will now be briefed on the audited report, and we will be asked to adopt Resolution R9-2023, which is accepting the FY 2022 audit and authorizing the extension of the independent audit firm's contract to perform the FY 2023 audit. A summary of the audit and report is in the board packet beginning on page 32. And now I'm going to turn it over to our COG Audit Committee Chair, Mayor Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to acknowledge my fellow members on the Audit Committee, David Myers, who is the retiring chair of the committee, longtime chair, along with Brian Feldman from the state of Maryland and Patrick Wan from the city of College Park. And also, I'd like to acknowledge our CFO, Julie Masson, and Anna Douglas, the comptroller. The audited financial and compliance reports for COG for the fiscal year ending July 30th, 2022 were presented to the Audit Committee on December 13th, 2022 by Principal Sean Walker of CLA LLP. A link to this report is in the board packet on page 31. There are 2 parts to this audit report, the financial statement section and the compliance for each major federal program, and report on internal controls over the compliance section. The auditors, they have issued an unqualified clean opinion on the basic financial statements, confirming that COG's financial information fairly represents its financial position. The auditors require communication to the board of directors has been provided as a separate document. You can see that on page 32. The auditors also issued an unmodified opinion on the scheduled expenditures of federal grants awards, and COG qualifies as a low-risk auditee, which is a modification of our previous position. In Note 12 in the financial statements, that addresses the pending GASB statement changes in financial reporting, and this was also reviewed by the Audit Committee on December 13th, 2022. So, based on this review, the committee is recommending approval of Resolution R9-2023, accepting the FY 2022 audit report and selecting CLA LLP to perform the FY 2023 audit and LLC at a cost not to exceed $75,000. And that resolution is on page 36 of the board packet. Hey, I do want to note one thing. A small issue did come up it actually goes back to 2015 and has to do with GASB 6768. And there was a discrepancy on with the our pension fund with the actual policy date versus the effective date. And the executive committee did vote to address this change. So if there are no questions, or Ms. Masson, if you have any comments or suggestions or ideas or things you want to put forward, I'd like to go ahead and take a vote on this at the chair's discretion.
So there was this audit finding from 2015 where when the valuation, so this was back when GASB 67 and 68 were first implemented, and the actuarial requirements were fairly onerous, so people moved their valuation dates to December 31. At that time, we should have moved the plan date to December 31 as well. It in no way affects the plan value, asset valuations, financial, no effect. It is just something that our auditors noted, and you've already fixed in the consent agenda, so I appreciate that. And like I said, it has no effect on our opinions. We're still clean, unmodified, and continue to be a low-risk auditee. But I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Great. Before asking for this to be moved, do I have any discussion or questions for Mayor Jordan? All right, not seeing any. Do we have anything online? No, we're good. All right. Mayor Jordan, would you like to move the resolution?
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Supervisor Bailey, thank you. Second. Any other discussion or comment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, not hearing any, the motion passes. All right, we're moving right along to our legislative priorities. So each year, COG develops and adopts a set of legislative priorities to guide our advocacy efforts at the state and federal level. The COG board and policy committees and staff use these priorities throughout the year to share information and advocate on behalf of our region. I'd like to note this document is solely for advocacy purposes and is not meant to include every one of our priorities or focus areas here at COG. This year, I had the pleasure of chairing the 2023 Legislative Committee, who reviewed and edited the proposed set of priorities that are in front of you today. You can see them starting on page 38 of the board packet. The priorities have also been reviewed by the leadership of each individual policy committee, so a great deal of thought has gone into this document. I want to thank the legislative Monica Baruti-Nunez on the COG staff for all her hard work on this. I'm just going to take a few minutes to walk us through the document and our priorities for this year, and then we will consider Resolution R10-23 to adopt the COG 2023 legislative priorities. So again, if you'd like to pull up page 38 of your board packet, as you'll see in our introduction, we actually did change the introduction this year to highlight the work that we are doing in advancing equity in the region to make sure that was front and center. Then in the first section, we focus on transportation funding, planning, and connectivity. This includes fixing the deficit in the Federal Transportation Trust Fund, federal funding for Metro Rail and the next generation transportation systems, and support of traffic incident management improvements, the Visualized 2045 Transportation Plan, and repeal of the current participation limitations of WMATA Board of Directors alternatives. The next section addresses climate and energy innovation and air quality protection. This section includes support of the region's climate goals, including multi-sector actions to reduce greenhouse gases, energy access for all, renewable energy standards, expanding clean energy innovation, and to enhance incentives and financing mechanisms for resilient energy infrastructure. The last item in this section supports policies that preserve and protect regional air quality and public health. The third section focuses on water quality protection. This covers water infrastructure, climate and flood resiliency initiatives, stormwater, water supply security, and regulatory flexibility. The next section covers legislative priorities related to housing and economic resources. This includes efforts to equitably increase the supply of housing and promote housing affordability as outlined in COG's 2030 Regional Housing Initiative targets. It also includes the support of efforts to prevent and end the experience of homelessness and the alignment of workforce development and job creation. The next section is on food security, health, and human services. Priorities include initiatives to address food insecurity, including programs that support childhood nutrition, healthy food access, and resilient food systems, farmers, and local food entrepreneurs. This section also addresses the need to combat substance abuse disorders and increase access to mental health services. The final section focuses on homeland security and public safety. This includes the support of funding for public health to prevent, prepare for, and respond to public health emergencies and pandemics, in addition to cybersecurity and emergency preparedness and continued support for urban area security initiative funding. So that is just a quick overview of our 2023 legislative priorities. Before I facilitate questions from the board members, I just wanted to recognize members of the Legislative Committee, also on the COG board. Commissioner Reuben Collins and Supervisor Penny Gross participated this year, and I just wanted to see if Mr. Collins or Supervisor Gross have anything to add. No? No, not at this time. Anyone else have any other questions or anything to add? Yes, here, Randall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two places. On page 48, the support efforts to combat substance use disorders. Out of curiosity, I'm asking why did we call out including opioids? Opioids is simply a substance like all other substances, and although it is a substance that we talk about the most right now, and although it's a very serious substance, substances change decade to decade, year to year. And one of the issues, if you are a practitioner of this, and I am, one of the issues is that we focus on the substance and not the disease of substance use disorder. And so I do not believe it's wise to say including opioids. I don't think it's necessary. Opioids are a substance. We don't say including cocaine. We don't say including free-base cocaine. We don't say including methamphetamine. There's also been such differing behavior in how we treat some substance uses versus other substance uses. And I don't need to go any further with that. I think we all know what we're talking about there. And so I'm curious as to why we believe we need to call out one specific substance when it's simply just a substance. That's my first question. My second question is back on page 41, and it is under the support federal funding for the region's metro system. The only thing I would question is line number 3, when it says permanently should provide, of course now my phone rings, provide its share of both operating and capital funding. I'm assuming that the federal government believes that they provide their share right now. They don't. Literally, we have 2 counties that actually are putting forth more money than the federal government, although Metro moves the federal government workforce. So my ideal or my thought would be something that says provide a larger share versus its share, because I don't think saying its share is quite getting to what we're trying to say in that section. So those are my 2 thoughts, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Randall. And I think taking the second one, I'm looking at the COG staff. The second one is a great addition. We can make that change. And on the first one, I'll defer to Ms. Nunez if there was any feedback from particularly the committee members for why they had called out opioids.
Thank you. There wasn't specific discussion on that at this year's committee meeting, but I think to Chair Randall's point, it would be appropriate and a friendly amendment to remove a reference to a specific drug.
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
That's a friendly amendment.
Thank you. Agree. Yes.
Thank you. I'm not going to make a motion today, but we're talking about health and human services here. And we now have at least one side of the Congress that may want to repeal health care for hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people in our nation. We also have a Supreme Court that has stripped pregnant people's rights to the full access of health care. And if we don't think that those sorts of moves are going to impact localities, because when people don't have health care, and certain families don't have access to the full spectrum of health care, maternal health care, and the like, then it falls on us as local jurisdictions. So I would just like to, and I might call some of the committee members when I see who the new members are this year, to discuss the idea of us speaking a little bit more in detail about access to health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Briskman, for raising that, and I would love to join you in those conversations. Thank you very much. Any other comments or feedback on the legislative priorities? No? All right. Seeing none, since both of those were friendly amendments and acceptable, I think we can move forward and ask, do we need to? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, go
Thank you,
ahead,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Snyder.
Dave Snyder, City of Falls Church. Strong support overall with the program. Two comments. There's a reference to exclusionary zoning, which I don't think is the most constructive approach to moving forward with our affordable housing agenda. And the second point is two issues that I think are very important that I think are maybe not receiving quite the emphasis I would like to see, which are highway safety measures and anti-gun violence measures. So just some general comments for the record, but certainly all the environmental, housing, and other initiatives, transportation especially, are things that we fully support. Thanks for the opportunity to make a couple of comments.
Thank you. All right. Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Gross.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Snyder's comments trigger something in me, and I didn't mean that as a pun. I'm sorry. But let's remember that we do have policy committees at COG, and many of these initiatives have come through the policy committee. So that's something that the policy committees can work on all year long as we're preparing a legislative package for the next year. I don't want, especially our new members, to miss the fact that we do have policy committees, and we actually have a history a bit of some things coming up without coming to the committee, and we have referred it back to committee. So I think that's the structure that we need to make sure we recognize. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gross and Vice Mayor Snyder. We can have your comments put back to the policy committees for consideration. Thank you. All right. All right, seeing no other hands, I will ask for a motion for the resolution to adopt our 2023 legislative priorities. Thank you, Supervisor Bailey. Do I have a second? Oh,
second.
All right. I'll take Vice Chair Allen as the second. All those, any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right. That does it for our legislative priorities then, adopting that. And now we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is the Regional Homeless Services Racial Equity and Systems Analysis. We're going to be joined by folks who will talk to us about COG's Homeless Services Committee's efforts to deepen and improve cross-jurisdictional collaboration work to prevent and end the experience of homelessness. This will include highlights from a racial equity systems analysis of continuums of care in the region. I'm going to welcome Amanda Harris, the COG Homeless Services Committee co-chair and Montgomery County Chief of Services to Prevent and End Homelessness, who will be joined by COG Housing Program Manager Hillary Chapman, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Harris.
Great. Can you hear me?
Just a little closer, you're good.
All right.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm not very tall, so bear with me. So thank you, Chair Stewart and Vice Chairs Allen and Lusk, and all members of the board. Again, my name is Amanda Harris. I am the Chief of Services to End and Prevent Homelessness with Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. And unfortunately, I am also serve as the co-chair of the Homeless Services Committee of COG. And unfortunately, my co-chair, Elizabeth Young, who represents the District of Columbia, she couldn't be with us today. So she is here in spirit, and we definitely collaborated on this slide deck. So it is January. Last month, many communities held memorial services for individuals that had died, unfortunately, not housed, experiencing homelessness, being out in the streets. The winter is typically a time where people are concerned about our neighbors that are sleeping outside. And it is true, many, unfortunately, people do suffer from the environment and to succumb to death because of the weather. But I just want to say, especially during the last 3 years, as we have been dealing with COVID-19, that even those folks that are in our shelter systems are also at risk. The experience of being homeless, whether you're sleeping outside or you're sleeping in a congregate setting, exacerbates your health issues. And for the last 3 years, our homeless continuums of care throughout the region have literally been saving lives. So I just want to do a shout out to my colleagues that are working in the COCs across the region for their efforts. All right, today we are going to share some important work that the Homeless Services Committee has done, and this is going to be centered around the Regional Compact to End Homelessness. So this was something that, an effort that was led by COG's Human Service Policy Committee and was adopted by the board in 2021. This compact is very ambitious, but definitely provides a roadmap and provided a set of actions for us to focus on in our efforts to end homelessness. There are 5 areas in the compact that we will be talking about today. The first is data sharing, regular reporting, our regional by name tracking and case coordination. And please forgive me if I get too wonky and use terms that you may not understand. So I'll just quickly say a by name list is literally a list with everyone's name of the people who are experiencing homelessness. So we might say that again, continuum of care, COC, that's also a common term that we might use. The other elements of the compact are around residency requirements, and then, of course, and very importantly, racial equity. Okay, so I want to dive deeper into the data sharing and regular reporting. So it's really important if we're going to collaborate as a region that we understand each other, that we are using common definitions, and that we really understand what is happening within the system. And we need to use data to do that. Data should be informing all our decisions. And we know that people move around. Many of us might live in a particular jurisdiction but work somewhere else. So the same is true for folks that are experiencing homelessness. So although we might individually have really great systems for tracking people, reporting outcomes, if we're not looking at that regionally, we're missing people. We're not understanding how people flow in and out of the jurisdictions. I think this is really important when you think about how our emergency shelters work in many parts of the region. During the winter months, emergency shelter greatly expands. So you see that there's more access to shelters during those winter months, but what happens in the warmer months? Most people are not going and getting connected to permanent housing. They're going somewhere else. And so there has always been a thought that perhaps people are going to DC, the district, where there is more shelter availability. So we can talk about that, but until we actually review the data, it's just an antidote. So that's a really important aspect of the data sharing. The other important part of data sharing is not just to look at aggregate data, but also to understand what's happening at an individual client level. So the first step that the committee took was to form a regional data metrics working group. So this group is comprised of our HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, another acronym. Their administrators and the data leads. So all of the COCs in the region have data people, and so they all came together, and their first project is working on a regional dashboard. So the way we share data regionally right now is just done through the annual report on the point in time. And the point in time is useful and provides some information. It is just a snapshot. It does not address how many people are served throughout the year, what are the outcomes, et cetera. But it's a first step. So the group is working on that, the first stage of the regional dashboard, which will include point-in-time information from all the jurisdictions, and also looking at the number of people served annually. That's just and also including demographic information, particularly race and ethnicity, so that we can understand that across the region and really be able to speak to the disparities. So that is the first step, and that dashboard is anticipated to be completed in June of this year. So right around the corner, anyone from the public will be able to access it. And then the next phase of that dashboard is going to be looking at our system performance measures. So first stage is just understanding who's experiencing homelessness across the region. And then the next phase is how are we doing, how well are we at actually ending homelessness? Are we reducing the length of time that people experience homelessness? Are we quickly connecting them to permanent housing? And then once they are connected to housing, are they staying housed? Those are really important things, and those system performance measures are something that we are required to report to HUD. So everyone already has this information. We're not asking jurisdictions to do more work. It's just simply making that information public. Okay. I think that's right there. So why does data sharing matter? I talked a little bit about this. Again, it helps us to identify trends, understand how people move in and out of the system. It's really important for us to be able to identify gaps in the system, to understand how resources are allocated, where's the concentration of people that are experiencing homelessness, and does that area have adequate resources to properly serve people, or are people going to other places like the district because there isn't that availability in their home jurisdiction. The other important piece is, like I mentioned earlier, is about being able to share client-level details. So I love data. Data is super fascinating to me, but we're talking about people, human beings, and every individual person matters, and so we need to be able to do that care coordination, to be able to share the client-level detail to make sure that no one falls through the cracks, that we can get a better assessment of what the individual needs. They may, for example, someone might be kind of going in and out of shelter, and sleeping outside in different parts of the region, and an outreach worker in DC has really connected with this person. They have established a relationship, they've gotten more information than anyone else has, but right now, that person's in shelter in Montgomery County, and we don't know anything because they only stay in shelter for a couple days. So being able to coordinate with that outreach worker and with our shelter case managers is going to help move that person into housing more quickly. And just as a real example, so Montgomery County, Prince George's, and the District of Columbia already have a data sharing agreement that has been in place for three years. It took 3 years to get everyone to agree to that, but we've had it now for 3 years. And so the 3 jurisdictions are meeting on a regular basis to compare those by name lists. So the list of people experiencing homelessness, and particularly focused on veterans, because there are lots of resources available for veterans, and most of those resources are not, it doesn't matter where you live, right? They're federal resources, so there's some flexibility of moving around. Anyway, so through this process, we identified a young woman, I'll call her Anna. She first became homeless or entered our system in 2011 when she was 25 years old. She had again bounced around, had episodic homelessness, so she would go and she would stay with friends or family, or she'd rent a room for a little while. She had stayed in DC shelter. She had been seen on the streets in DC. She had gone in and out of Montgomery County shelters. She also presented with a lot of challenges, had serious mental illness, had some pretty significant behavioral challenges that made it difficult for her to remain in emergency shelter. It's a congregate setting, right? And so you have to be able to get along with people. She had a few violent outbursts, and so she was frequently getting suspended or terminated from shelter. And so she was lost, and she wasn't on anyone's radar for a long time. Through this regional collaboration, we were able to determine that she was being served by both the District of Columbia and Montgomery County, and was on both our by name list and had actually been matched to housing, but no one could find her. So we made a plan, we put a BOLO, be on the alert, we were able to connect with her, and then we allowed her to choose. Where would you like to be housed? You have these two options, and choice is really important for people, and so she chose to live in Montgomery County. She's been in housing now at one of our site-based Housing First permanent supportive housing programs, and if not for this regional collaboration, she would probably still be out on the streets right now, or bouncing around in shelters. So that is why this data sharing really matters, and it's important that we do get to that client level detail. And not, although the aggregate data is also really important, but this really is going to help us end homelessness for every single person. Let's see. Okay. So the other action item of the committee has been focused on, again, that care coordination or case coordination. So regional case coordination learning collaborative has been formed that includes all the participating jurisdictions and the COG Homeless Services Committee. This committee is made up of the coordinated entry managers. So for those of you that don't know, coordinated entry is required by HUD, and it's a mechanism in which you use a common assessment tool to determine an individual's housing needs, and then you make referrals to housing based on vulnerability. So that is a requirement. We have to do coordinated entry because unfortunately no one has enough resources to house everyone, so we've got to prioritize based on need. So that's coordinated entry. So this group is comprised of all those coordinated entry managers, or the air traffic controllers, as they like to call themselves, for the continuum of care. They're probably the most knowledgeable of all the resources that exist, and they're the ones that actually facilitate those placements. So the first step was really focused on having them just get to know each other and build relationships and establish some trust. Because resources are limited, people are generally very tight and are not so open to sharing because you're trying to protect your own. So we focused a lot on just kind of getting to know each other, understanding how each system works, sharing best practices, sharing challenges, and now the group is trying to identify some projects that would be mutually beneficial. So one example of that is looking at the assessment tool. So for many years, most jurisdictions have been using a tool called the VI SPDAT. You don't have to remember it. It's the Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. And don't bother remembering it because it's going away. It was a great tool for a while, and then there was a bunch of research done, and the tool actually has some racial bias, particularly for African American women, and they're scoring very low, and so the lower the score, allegedly, the less vulnerable you are. You're not going to get placed in housing, and so that has a lot to do with how the tool is administered, who's doing the assessment, a person's willingness to share personal information, trust in government or nonprofits. So the tool is, we got to find a different one. We need a different tool. And so that's something that all the jurisdictions are looking into, and that's a project that the region can work on, because it would be fantastic if we all could use the same assessment tool, and that would make communicating and coordinating across the jurisdictions and placing people into housing much easier. That is a tall order. Some of us have already been using our own local tools, but I think it's worthy of exploration for sure. Let's see. Okay, I talked to this one. Yeah, I already talked about this, so I'm going to skip this one. Okay, so the fourth action item is around residency requirements. I will just say residency is really complicated. And when we talk about residency requirements, that's both who can access services in a particular jurisdiction and also about, let's say I'm connected to a housing program, a rapid rehousing program in Fairfax, and I'm making this up, so if there's anyone from Fairfax, I don't know if this is actually a policy, you know, you have to live in Fairfax. So you come to Fairfax, you have to live in Fairfax, that's where the resources go. Where the household might say, well, I actually have family connections in Prince George's, and the rents there, I can find a place that's a little more affordable to me. But they can't because of the restrictions on where you can spend the funds. And so that's definitely something that we need to look at, and how do we overcome those barriers, because we want, especially in those time-limited housing interventions, it's really important that they're going to have a sustainable plan, because it doesn't do us any good to house someone for 12, 18 months if when the subsidy ends, they're going to end up right back in the system. And then the other side of the residency is about who can access shelter, who's prioritized for housing. I think most of us don't have limitations on who can access shelter, but when it comes to who we house, there are some restrictions and prioritization, some places, of folks that lost their housing in Montgomery County. So super complicated. We want to do it. It allows for choice, and we can better meet the need, but it's going to require a coordinated effort across all the jurisdictions and within the jurisdictions. We need to understand the unintended consequences of changing our residency requirements. It's my least favorite subject. Okay, let's see. So then the final piece, which is a huge body of work, is taking action on racial inequities. So we embarked on a partnership with C4, Center for Innovation, to help us understand disparities in our system, do an analysis, and then figure out, well, what do we do about it? So that kicked off in June of 2021. And that included that data analysis, both qualitative and quantitative. So there was some focus groups actually talking to both service providers and frontline staff, and then also people experiencing homelessness. Then in January of 22, we entered into the action planning. So we learned a lot of stuff. We understood where the disparities were, and then we needed to figure out, okay, what do we do about it? And then that final phase was a synthesis of and development of those recommendations. So we're still working on that to get a full set of recommendations about how can we actually reduce racial disparities across the region. I think I'll just also say, just for context, disparities exist throughout the region. In the metropolitan Washington, 73, and according to the last year's point in time, 73% of people identified as Black or African American, 73%. And that's compared to only 25% of all residents that are Black or African American. That's a big deal. That's a huge disparity. And even when you control for poverty, still African Americans are overrepresented. I think sometimes we think, oh, that's because there's more people of color that are in poverty. Yes, but that doesn't make sense. It doesn't fully explain why so many more Black or African Americans are experiencing homelessness. We understand that that is largely to do with decades and decades of systemic racism, particularly around housing discrimination, other systems of care, the justice system, child welfare system, or educational system, all of those systems failing people and exacerbating their experience and then ending up in the homeless continuum. So that's depressing, but we're going to do something about it. All right, so what have we learned so far? So we did the analysis, so all the jurisdictions pulled their data together so we could understand how disparities show up in each jurisdiction. We also looked at how those systems work together, and kind of did that analysis of the qualitative data, because it's not just about, we want to actually talk to people and understand why they think it is that they're experiencing disparate outcomes or disparate services. I'll give an example in Montgomery County. When we did our analysis of the outcomes, we discovered that white Hispanic households were the most likely to exit to permanent housing. That's a good thing, right? That's good. But also the most likely to return to homelessness. So that seemed odd. We wanted to dig deeper. And so we actually worked with a local organization that primarily works with the Latino community to engage in some focus groups with people that have been through the homeless system, so that we could get a better understanding of what's actually going on. What do you attribute to the reasons for that? And that was useful. I think there's some more work that we need to do around ensuring that we actually maintain contact information for people. So these are folks that had left and then returned and had left again. But I think the biggest takeaway was not knowing where to go after they had found themselves in trouble again, and then just a reluctance to do so, that I should be able to take care of myself and I don't want to go back and rely on the government. So that's just one example. So the other lesson that we've learned is around system improvements. So thinking about how we standardize practices across the region. We're all doing similar but sometimes different things. So we want to make sure that people experiencing homelessness can receive the same quality of treatment no matter where they show up in the region, that it doesn't look different. We also, as part of this, talked about really including people with lived experience, including them in the decision-making and the policy development and the program development, and not just having, one person with lived experience of homelessness sitting on your governing body of the COC, right? One person can't represent everyone, but really broadening that involvement and participation of folks with lived experience. And then, let's see, funding. Always funding, right? We always need more money, please. So I think this is about, we need to understand the funding that is available, how jurisdictions are investing, and how that matches, again, with the need. So is there an equitable distribution of resources across the region? And then, what's the other piece? And then, of course, the culture shift, getting people comfortable with talking about race, getting people comfortable with giving up power, allowing the experts, the folks that go through it every day, to not just advise policy, but to create policy that does require us to humble ourselves and give up some of our power. Okay. So we hope to have a full report from C4 very soon, and we will certainly make sure that that's available. And so a lot of the work with C4 focused on what we as homeless continuums of care can do, making sure that we are not, we're not making the problem worse. That said, there is only so much we can do, and we can focus on how we more quickly house people, how we ensure that there's equal outcomes, but there's very little that the homeless system can do to fix those other systems of care that lead to the disparities. So that's something that we would certainly look to you all to help us think through how can we move that work further upstream. So this set of recommendations or items to explore are really focused on the housing aspect. So how can we more quickly connect people into housing, particularly people of color? We have found that, at least in Montgomery County, Black or African Americans, it does take longer to get them housed. It's about 2 weeks longer on average than all other racial groups. So here are some things that you could do. Just cause eviction is a big one. So during the pandemic, there's a lot of tenant protections, and those are incredibly helpful. They have mostly gone away, and I know this changes based on the jurisdiction, but in Maryland, for example, there is no just cause eviction. So a landlord can simply say after 12 months, I'm not going to renew your lease. They don't have to have a reason. They can just simply say, I don't want to do it. And that causes major issues for people. We are seeing that right now with people that have been in a housing program for 10 years in the same unit, and now all of a sudden the landlord isn't going to renew because they want to increase the rent. And our programs can only pay so much. So that's a big issue. That is a state level issue. So Montgomery County can't actually do anything about it other than advocate at the state level. Other examples are ban the box legislation. So a big reason why people get denied housing is because of their criminal background, and oftentimes the crimes are just simply crimes of being homeless, public intoxication, public urination, loitering, et cetera. So then it makes it even harder for them to come into housing. In Montgomery County, thank you, Councilmember Evan Glass, for initiating this. We do have the Housing Justice Act, which does limit a landlord's ability to deny people based on their criminal background, and also requires more transparency in why people are being denied. And I think that's a really important aspect too, that it's not just about criminal background, but it's about credit, rental history. Many landlords simply use companies to do a screening, and the company decides, who knows how they decide, but they decide that this person is not going to be a good tenant, and then they're denied. And so it's important to actually get the landlords to say, here are the reasons why we would deny, and here's why we denied this particular person. Other things are around zoning reform for equity. So this is a hot topic. I'll just put it out there. It would be helpful to have more housing. So density restrictions cause some problems. And then deeper income targeting for housing developments. This is critical. Oftentimes, people experiencing homelessness cannot access affordable housing units. There are barriers. Maybe the income limits are too high, or the affordable housing developers are denying people, again, because of credit and poor rental history. So really making sure that as new developments come online, that there are set-asides or there's incentives to have units that are available to people exiting homelessness, not just people with special needs, because we see that a lot, but special needs can mean a lot of different things. We really are asking for specific resources for people exiting homelessness. The other piece is around fair housing enforcement. So even though there are some laws that exist, landlords don't know about them. Sometimes they know and they don't care, but I think more often than not, they're just not aware. So making sure that there is education and outreach with our landlords, and then also providing resources to whoever is charged with enforcing fair housing. They're often short-staffed. They don't have the ability to proactively go and do testing and surveillance to figure out who is discriminating. Most of the time it's dependent on the tenant actually filing a claim and then seeing it all the way through. And that's a lot to expect from someone who's just trying to get into housing. And then, of course, funding strategies, so aligning the sources to support the capacity to address disparities in our system. And let's see, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. Okay, go faster. Okay, I'm gonna, 30 more seconds. Okay, I will just, great, I talked too much. Sorry about it. Good news, we've done some great things. You can see we have reduced homelessness in the region. It is going down. There's been unprecedented investment, so the COVID did bring a lot of money into homeless services. I've been doing this nearly 20 years, and I saw more money than I have ever seen before. And that ending, I do believe that we can end the experience of homelessness. One last thing I will leave you with, since it is point in time. It's really important to note that although our point-in-time numbers have gone down, we have housed so many more people. So if you think about the tub analogy, so you have to both turn off the faucet and release the drain. So we've done a really good job with those federal resources, releasing the drain. We've housed more than double the amount of people, but they keep coming in. So without further investment, we are going to quickly have the tub overflowing again.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Harris, for that update and that terrific report. We appreciate it. Just to remind my colleagues, especially folks new, is that the PowerPoint will be available after our meeting today. So I should remind you ahead of time, so hopefully you aren't scrambling notes, but all that information will be available. We can open it up now for discussion for a few minutes. Yeah, Chair McCain.
Thank you for the presentation. While we've made a lot of strides, I think one thing that it is very disturbing to me, and I think it's probably something that as a region we experience, but our last point in time count had nearly 30% of the homeless population were youth. And I don't know if there's specific, in all of these strategies and all of these issues, if there's specific thought given to custom tailoring programs to try to address youth homelessness, not only youth with homeless parents, but of course youth that don't have any parents that claim them. And of course this has huge complications and costs for local governments and schools, and this is our next generation of leaders. And so, and I will add that in terms of public optics, unfortunately, too many people think about the homeless population as one way, and they don't see the pictures of young children who don't have anywhere to live. And so I guess my question is in all of these strategies, is there best practices? Is there regional ways that we might specifically target ending homelessness in our youth population? I know there's obviously prioritization at times for people who come in who have youth with them, in terms of housing, emergency shelter, and some of those things. But I'm just thinking of something longer term, more systemic, more regionally focused on attacking youth homelessness specifically, and if there was any thought given to that.
Sure. So short answer, yes. There are definitely strategies, and I think we have to distinguish between young people with families and then unaccompanied minors. And youth homelessness is a very complicated issue, and the point in time does not do it justice. We know that young people experiencing homelessness, it looks different. They're not as visible. Sometimes they are, but usually not. They're bouncing around, couch surfing, sleeping in hallways of apartment complexes where we're not looking on the point in time. So that is definitely something that is important to the Homeless Services Committee. I think as individual jurisdictions, we've been talking about that, but we haven't really looked at it regionally, and that would be another good project for us to embark on.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful if we do take a deeper dive into that. I mean, one of the benefits is many of these children are enrolled in our school systems.
Yeah.
And so we do have some information about them, whether or not it can be shared, but a lot of times people don't see this population because they are in school. They don't see where they go after school. And because they're enrolled in our regional school systems, you know, we have ways to try to intervene and help. And I would just think as a region, it would be something we could look at because of the complexity. You know, so many times we might attack these issues as one local government, but in this particular case, the level of complexity involved in this, the different laws in different states and jurisdictions, I mean, this is something that I think we could look at streamlining and getting better help as a region to this population.
Yeah. Thank Thank you, Chairman McKay. And just to drill down on that a little bit more, one of the questions I was going to have was regarding young people, particularly LGBTQ plus and transgender young people, as we're seeing more restrictive laws across the country being passed. And I thank my colleagues in D.C. for their sanctuary law. But do we have any data on that, or specifically on, LGBTQ young people and transgender young people?
That's a great question. With not a great answer. We have some information. So HUD has required us for some time to track gender identity. So that is something that we are regularly asking, that we have some information about. They recently updated the choices that people have. It used to just be male, female, trans, female, and that was it. So there's more options for people to select from. So we do have that. What not all the jurisdictions have been collecting, including Montgomery County, is information about sexual orientation. And so that is something that we're talking about. What's the best way to ask those questions, to collect that information? There is also, in Maryland, there's the Maryland Youth Reach, which is a different count outside of the point in time to specifically count young people experiencing homelessness, and that is a question that is asked there. And if you're interested, I can certainly share the Youth Reach report.
Great. Thank you. I have Chair Wheeler and then Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, and thank you for this information. Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, I was actually spent an hour and a half this morning at a shelter with wraparound services, and what was amazing to me was the stark difference between families with evictions and what's happening now because of some of the rollbacks and what's happened with with people getting COVID funds, and chronic homelessness, which are two sort of separate areas, it sort of feels like to me. But one of the things that they talked about were diversion programs, right? How do we prevent people, especially the families and the evictions, from getting there? Do you have information on diversion programs just in general throughout the region?
Yes, many of the jurisdictions are implementing some diversion or problem-solving strategies, often at the front door. That problem-solving or diversion can include some financial assistance, but also just connecting people with resources and doing some mediation, either between family members or landlords. But it is a really important strategy that we need to do more of. And in fact, that is something that is specifically spelled out in the new U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness federal plan, the all-in, their federal plan to end homelessness. Problem solving or diversion is recommended as a key strategy to try and stem the inflow. I will just add the other thing about the prevention. As the federal resources are drying up, many jurisdictions are already out of their ERAP funds. We have to be smart about how we're using eviction prevention and making sure that we are targeting those households that are most likely to enter homelessness, because we don't have enough money to help everyone that is unstably housed or behind on rent.
Thank you. Council President Glass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the question you raised, accentuating the point of Chair McKay regarding youth, right, and the focus therein. And nationally, we know that 40% of youth who are homeless do identify as LGBTQ+. And so we all have to take efforts there. But I think the broader question goes back to one of the slides that Ms. Harris showed regarding root causes and the various ways that individuals and families do become homeless. And when we do undertake the point in time count later this month, and I encourage everybody here to participate, ours is January 25th. I think most regional jurisdictions are as well. If you haven't done it, please, I encourage you to do so. Of all the questions that are asked, I recently had a meeting with an advocate for reforming our, nationally, the foster care system, and trying to identify how many kids exit the foster care system without any resources. And there's lots of different policies and programs to tackle that. But I think maybe adding this to a question regionally or within our jurisdictions to help get to some of these root causes. The simple question is, Is that already a question? How many questions are there, not wanting to inundate people who we're trying to help?
Great question. And Hillary, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we already ask about history in the foster care system.
We do, and it's actually not a question that is required by HUD, but it is something that COG has tracked over the years because we think this is a valuable piece of data to track for consistency and also to ensure that our work with our partners and other systems of care are working together.
COG leading the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I found this amazing. Just a couple of questions on some things that you brought up about looking internally and really examining barriers and looking to reform culture. Speaking to that, I remember a conversation with a constituent who spoke about this issue in such a crisp way that it has remained with me for years. They said this experience of dealing with government when it comes to being homeless is one in which I have to explain my trauma to most likely a middle class white person, and whether it's real or not, they feel a sense of judgment and everything like that. And then as part of giving me help, I have to connect with all of these other offices and agencies, typically with middle class white people who make me relive the same trauma over and over again. And if I were to show frustration with having to answer the same questions over and over again, I'm told, well, that's, just the way it is, the way our systems are. But if I act out in frustration, that spreads throughout the organization like wildfire, and everybody seems to know that. And basically, they were relaying a feeling of being dehumanized by this effort to do a very humanizing thing. And so I was just wondering if there was any attention to looking at things from that level and including clients as experts to really think about not only how to reform policy, but to go about reforming service delivery and dealing with people in real terms.
Yes, that's a very important point, and it is really important that our homeless service agencies look like the people they're serving, and not just the line staff. We have certainly seen that oftentimes the folks, the frontline staff are people of color, but then when you get to middle managers and leadership, that's not always true. So making sure there's a diverse workforce and that people are trained. The other thing I will say about this, and people having to repeat their story, is exactly why we need data sharing agreements, so that people do not have to do that. I know that there are lots of concerns about privacy and I think people are resistant in the best interest of the people we serve, but it actually, I feel like, is more harmful to not share that, and not just share within the homeless service COCs, but also with other systems of care. Because oftentimes people are not coming just because they're homeless. They also have other needs and need to coordinate with other systems of care. And I'll just do another plug for the federal plan. I'm not usually that supportive of federal plans, but this one's really good, so I encourage you all to read it. There is also an emphasis on data sharing agreements, both across regions and homeless services committees or COCs, but also with other systems of care, and they will be putting out guidance and templates for memorandums of understanding, for business agreements, so that we can actually move the needle on data sharing. And we do currently have that data sharing agreement between Montgomery County, Prince George's, and the District of Columbia, and it would be fantastic if our other jurisdictions would piggyback off of that so that we could share across the whole region.
Thank you. One fairly process question. What is the rationale for doing the point in time study in the middle of January? I would think if you want to really not know what your homeless population is, do it in January where people find hallways to sleep in and things, versus doing it in the middle of June where people are probably outside because it's warmer.
That is a great question, and you should pose that to HUD.
Okay. So it's a HUD issue.
Yes,
It's a
it is
federal
not,
government issue.
right, it is not our decision. We don't make
I will
that.
be calling Mark Warner and Tim Kaine tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Randall, for asking that. I was thinking that same question the other day when we were going over schedules. I don't know if anyone online, oh, go ahead, Mr. Malino, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair Stewart. So, thank you, Eric, the city, county of Los Angeles has a tax on all property transactions over a certain amount of money. I think it's $5 million or plus. Go to a regional affordable housing fund, and I just throw that out here because I know but all of us trying to pursue this individually, make it, I think, very difficult. A regional effort, $1 billion. I just throw it out there on your last slide, Amanda, the long-term solution. And it might be a very interesting endeavor for this region to attack affordable housing on a regional basis with regional funding.
He likes the idea.
Council members, I have to ready to jump on this right now. We're throwing it out there, but I just wanted to raise that as a very interesting conversation, because I think we have to have that conversation on a variety of fronts, because each as a stage for local government trying to respond.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Supervisor Bailey, I think it will give you the last word before closing out this section.
Appreciate that, Madam Chair. One of the pieces that I wanted to ask you about was the mental health piece. And this scenario, oftentimes we forget about that piece as it relates to homelessness, and it's very much connected. So from a funding perspective and from a data perspective, I think that's something that we might want to incorporate more visibly. So could you speak to that just briefly for me, please?
Briefly, I will do my best to be brief. Yes, mental health is a really important aspect that we need to think about, and it is, again, about coordinating with other systems of care. So for a lot of people, really all they need is housing, but there is a subset of people experiencing homelessness that do need the longer-term wraparound support services, and that includes behavioral health services. And so our work is really about connecting them to those services, which has been challenging during the pandemic as there's been more of a shift towards telehealth. Many of the folks that we're working with, telehealth doesn't work. They don't have a laptop. They don't even have a place to sit to have a telehealth conversation. But it is data that we're tracking on the point in time. But I just want to say, homelessness is not because of mental health or substance use, right? Homelessness exists because there isn't enough housing. So we need more housing, and we need to help connect people to mainstream services. But most importantly, we can't end homelessness if we don't have enough housing.
Okay. I think that's yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Bailey.
A quick comment. Absolutely, I concur with you that that's not the purpose of it, but mental health can be exacerbated by homelessness.
Yes.
And so I just want to bring to your attention that funding is there nationally and regionally for that specific as it relates to homelessness. So I just wanted to share that with you. And thank you so much for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Well, Thank you again, Ms. Harris, for joining us today. I think what we've heard around the room is there a great deal of interest in this topic for the Homeless Service Committee to get more data and more information regarding particularly young people and really drilling down into different segments of young people. As you said, that's a very complex issue. I think the board would like to hear more of that and how we can be more supportive in that area. And in particular, as you raised, I know you're still getting the report and discussing the issues around equity. I think the data are incredibly disheartening, not surprising, but in particular, data which you talked about, having African American and Black individuals and families having 2 weeks more time that they can access services. As Chair Dorsey mentioned, how sometimes things can be very inhumane, I guess, in terms of how people need to go through the process. And so we're glad that you're listening to the people and engaging with them, and we look forward to having more information about how we can tackle these issues. So hope to have you back again very soon. Thank you very much for that. All right, our last item today is we are going to move into an executive session for the discussion, for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter. This is a closed session. Everyone other than COG board members and selected COG staff are required